And libraries ultimately want to be the third place, right? We've got work, that's your first place, your home is your second place. And library systems love the idea of becoming that third place where people will go out to hang out, to meet friends, go grab a coffee. At the Library of the Dock, we have a coffee like nook where it's actually a coffee shop. More than a nook, where people can come down. The whole first floor is really devised at this idea of sitting down, having coffee and being social. So we want them to become the third place. We want the community to feel comfortable enough to say, I want to let my head down, or I want to research something, or I want to explore something, I'm going to go to the library. Because ultimately we are up against a whole lot of different things that are designed to distract a whole lot of people. So, you know, the cinema and the video store, which doesn't exist anymore. But, but all these different things that are going along, libraries really want to develop this idea of being your third place, which is great. But really, libraries are based on this idea of like formal learning. And that's where we all come from. I love this photo because I don't know which one I'm actually in the photo. I don't know if I'm the kid here, or the girl who's asleep, or the kid at the back who's just like completely tuned out. Because that's actually been my experience when it came to kind of like the educational system. I was one of these people that was bored because I kind of understood it a little bit faster than everyone else, and I just wasn't engaged. And it took me a long time before I actually found something that could keep up with my pace of learning. And then luckily I'm standing in front of you all now, so it all kind of worked out well. But formal learning is all about learning it theoretically. Like you get an idea about something, and then what do you do with it? Like if you're lucky, you'll be able to go out and actually apply something that you learned. Think about all the math classes you used. I mean, I'm a maker. I do a lot of things on engineering, and it was only the last year that I actually used any sort of trigonometry in any sort of practical way. And that's the idea when it comes to learning. In fact, libraries are built on that as well. You go into a library traditionally, you get a book, you don't talk to anyone. You read and you research, and then you go out and maybe one day you'll be able to get a chance to actually apply what you learned. It's an incredible thing when you think about it, especially standing here today. So you're not really learning by actually taking it out in the world and practicing it. And that's kind of what a lot of this maker culture and maker spaces are really addressing now. Now in 2014, the Deloitte report was commissioned by the Australian government to look at the idea of the Australian maker movement. See, Australia has this incredible history when it comes to innovation. Basically, because we were so far away from the rest of the world, we had to innovate. Out of curiosity, can anyone think of an Australian invention that comes to their mind? Perfect. I like that you said that because as someone who lived in South Australia, that's the first thing that comes to mind. What about, anyone else got something else? Hills Hoist. Hills Hoist, fantastic. Normally I've got to say, in Melbourne I've got to tell them. Here, everyone's got it. What about the Hills Hoist? Right? What about the Victor lawnmower? Right? You shouted me one after. It's been a long time. So we have this really rich history of innovation. But in the last decade, in the last 20 years or 30 years, can anyone think of an innovation that went on and like lit the world on fire? Wi-Fi. Okay, so I'm not sure what that is. So Wi-Fi was an Australian invention? Okay, that's interesting. I stand corrected. I actually believe that it came from another country, but I'm going to look that up. That's not a problem. So Wi-Fi. And what about the cochlear implant? Right? But what else? Where the name brands? Where's it Wi-Fi obviously is in every laptop and all the rest of it, and you're screwing up my presentation with that answer. Damn it! And thank you very much, bye. But the truth of the matter is, when you look at it, there were some real amazing Australian icons that went around the world. We were able to answer questions, mainly because we couldn't afford to bring in the answers due to shipping and all the rest of the costs. Now we buy everything on AliExpress, it's all coming from China, but the truth of the matter is, we had this history that kind of got left to the wayside, and everyone became cerebral. All the things that were being pushed were the cerebral arts as such. So doctors, lawyers, the big brain drain in Australia where everyone was skilled up and then went overseas because they had the money to actually support their research and all the rest of it. So the government really said, okay, we've got to look at something because we're pulling all our resources out of the ground and that's going to stop. And what's going to happen to us as a nation when we can't actually afford to sell off everything that we have? So the government brought in the Deloitte report. You can download it from their website. It's a very interesting read. I'm actually really proud to say that the thing on that screen is called a LifeX bulb, and that's a LED bulb that is actually Wi-Fi addressable, which means that you can control it with your smartphone. An Australian invention. In fact, you know you're doing well with something like that when I believe it was Philips create the Lux Bulb just to compete. Right? This was funded on Kickstarter and actually came out of a place called the Community Creative Hackerspace, a place where I learned a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about today. So these guys went off and created this. It became one of the biggest fundraisers in Australia's history on Kickstarter. They unfortunately had to take it overseas because there was no companies here to actually fund what they were doing. It's an absolute heartbreak. But they're now in San Francisco and they're producing these bulbs. So that became the big child of this report, and you can read about it online. So with that report, the government went, fantastic, we're going to develop a maker community and we're going to start funding a whole lot of different spaces in schools and in libraries. And I'm sure some people in this room had that experience where someone came up to them and said, we're going to make a makerspace. And I'm sure that a lot of people felt the same way as this guy. We have a makerspace. Well, what's that mean? I couldn't help myself. I saw that photo and I was like, oh, it's exactly what it is. What is a makerspace? What's that about? So let's start getting some definitions so that when we talk about this, the word makerspace seems to be like these two conglomerations of words, but what's it actually mean? So first of all, like makerspaces in general just are there to introduce people to new technology, new methodology, being able to take ideas and see where they go. They can also mean places where people come and do some formal learning. They could be places where people rent out space and just build stuff. So let's break those definitions down a little bit. Now, the definitions that I'm using today come from a site called make.com, which is actually a magazine based on maker culture. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And they basically define the three definitions like this. You've got a Fab Lab, which is a fabrication lab. Now, Adelaide actually has a Fab Lab, and I definitely, if you get a chance to go down, check it out. The guys there do amazing work, and I was able to meet them a few years ago, and I was just very impressed with the fact that I had left and the place that I always wanted to be was right in my old neighborhood. Fabrication labs are basically places where people can rent time on machines that they might not have accessibility to. In America, there's a company called Tech Shop, which you take a Google and take a look at what that is, and it's actually there to help designers and manufacturers and prototypers who are not situated with a company that's going to put the money out to lay out all that money up front to actually design something and to create a prototype to see if their ideas actually fly. So Fab Labs, they don't really have, they have a quick induction course and you're basically able to go out and play with the machines without hurting yourself, without hurting anyone else. And it's basically, think of it as a men's shed for hire. The model for the Fab Labs actually came out of MIT. So MIT actually sponsors with information and set up advice on how to build these spaces. And then you have a hackerspace, which again, language, I belong to a hackerspace in Melbourne and we get emails all the time saying, can you please shut down the government's website? They're taxing me. And at that point we go, we have to forward it to the federal police. The term hacker is really synonymous with someone who steals money out of a bank, who like does bad stuff on the internet. You know, thank you Sandra Bullock for creating a movie, you know, called The Net, which scared everyone off what the internet was about. But the truth when it comes to hackerspaces were that they actually came out of software labs that needed a hardware option. So a lot of people were developing software and they needed, let's say, an extra board for the computer, or they wanted to make a dongle that, like a USB key that they would put in to say, yes, you paid for the software. These came out of these like Hackerspace labs, and out of that, really the focus was about taking existing technology and then modifying it in a certain way where they're able to go and actually apply it to something else. So one of my favorite ones, I don't have a slide of it today, is when people take a Roomba and stick forks and knives on it, and then take another Roomba and let it just kind of like joust each other. Technically, that's hacking, right? They're not doing anything apart from adding something and giving it a new functionality. Then you actually have what we were talking about before, which is a Makerspace, which is basically a model of both of those spaces. So they teach more formal classes. You can come in and learn a subject. In the Makerspace at Library of the Dock, we have classes on Arduino and 3D printing. And for that reason, as well as being able to come in and actually use the facilities. So we had someone who came in and broke the jack off his headphones. He wanted to use the soldering station to be able to do that. He had never done it before. He asked for some advice, and it was like this self-guided learning exercise for him. And then he was like, wow, that was really cool. Like, I didn't expect that I'd be able to fix it. And then he turned around and wanted to do an electronics class that was more formal. It was a 2-hour session with an instructor and with a kit and following a book, and if you got into trouble, you were able to ask. So Makerspaces, they're the 3 definitions. A lot of people call one thing a Makerspace and it's a table in the side of a room, or they'll call it a fabrication lab and it's really a formal learning situation. So we're going to use these definitions today, and we'll see what happens.